Okay, so far we've only been using a single video track. We've got at least two, possibly three audio tracks. Let's talk a little bit about what tracks are and what they do and how things on different tracks interact with things above and below them. We're going to start by talking about video tracks. So in this project I only use a single video track, and most of the time I keep my video edits to either one or two video tracks. I like to work neat. You can work messily. You can, I've dealt with people who build just giant honking great ziggurats of footage, and then you have to try and sort that out later, which is always a pain. But that's a viable way of working. I personally like to work neat, and I like to keep things down onto one track if I can help it, two if something gets quite complicated, right? You can do almost everything you want to do with two or three video tracks maximum. You shouldn't need any more than that, although, like I've said, some people just prefer to work that way. So I have one video track here, and what I want to do is I want to put some video on top of the edit here so that I cut to another shot and then cut back onto Wayne's face. I'm going to make an IO selection on here very quickly, and what I'm going to do is I can now just drag it above, and you see how now it appears above the previous footage, yeah? So this is video track 2. Now as I play through, look what happens. We cut to the shot on top. Under normal circumstances, we will always see the video on the highest track under the playhead. So there's nothing above track 1 here, therefore we see this shot of the shoelaces. Now, even though we have the shot of the weight stack here, the dumbbells, or barbells, whatever, the one-handed one, the dumbbells are on the higher video track, therefore they show instead. What happens if I zoom this down though, you'll see that I can see the shot underneath it. So it's literally like having postcards stacked on top of each other. We see the one on the top of the stack. If we move that around, if we kind of scale it up or down or move it around, then we can see the shot underneath. Now, usually edits on the higher tracks like this, they're used to make things like cutaways, reaction shots, other forms of edit like that. So let's say if we want to... Let's say I actually want to use this shot up here as... There we go. So once he's lifted it, I then want this kind of reaction maybe here. And what we can do now is he lifts... Okay, let's shift that onwards a little bit. I'm going to extend this shot so the edit will actually work. Give me a second. So lift it up and then straining face, let it go back down again. Yeah? So this is why I might choose to make edits this way, and it's why I might choose to edit on a higher video track. For the rest of this project, I'm going to keep my edit to one track just because I like to work neat. If I want to do this, I might just use an insert edit. I mean, the advantage of putting reactions and cutaways up here is that I don't destroy anything else. What would happen is if I split up the clip and then got rid of it and I used an insert edit here, actually if I wanted to change that, it gets a bit awkward. Yeah, I might have to go with the trim tools, but actually if I just keep this up, then it's relatively easy for me to change this edit around without destroying what's underneath. That's the practical reason for why we might do this. Now, if I want to do a place on top edit just using the keyboard, what I do is I hit F12, and that will automatically place my edit above everything else that's already there, and then perform an overwrite edit into the empty space. Place on top does not move everything else along, right? Because if it hits something, it will just stack up again and again and again until it no longer overwrites something. So it will not ripple, it will not trim or cut anything, it won't overwrite anything, it will literally just place it on the very top level, and you can just keep going with these. And you can have loads and loads and loads of video tracks. I once, and this was a very long time ago and it was a very bad project, I once had an edit from a client in for grade, and oof, it had, I think, 15 video tracks, and it had this kind of bizarre pyramid of footage on there. Solid pyramid, like 10 tracks deep of just footage everywhere. When that came to the conform, it took forever. In fact, it didn't work in the conform, which is a good excuse to work neat, in my opinion. And my experience with conform and workflow is why I do like to work neat when I'm editing, because I just know it's going to create less work for somebody else or myself later on during the later stages of post-production. So that is the basics of how a video track works. Now let's talk a little bit about audio tracks. Now, let's talk about audio tracks, because we've talked about video tracks for long enough. Now, unlike video tracks, audio tracks don't block each other out. They play at the same time. So I can take this little clanking noise, and what I can do is I can put it somewhere else. So I can bring this down here, and then let's say I want to put it here. And I'll just make sure this track is mono for the time being. So what I can do is I can put this little clanking noise here at the start of him lifting the weight and straining, so it sounds like he might be lifting the weight out of the rack and then doing his first repetition. Like so. So again, it's important. Audio tracks don't block each other out. They all add together. If you get too many audio samples and play them all at the same time, you're going to get a kind of homogenized mess that you can't really pick stuff out of. So you don't want to just keep layering things up and up and up. When you first start out in audio, when I first started out doing basic sound edits, I used to think, oh, I can make a really interesting multi-layered soundscape, and it always just wound up being this kind of brown tone mess, this kind of just uniform thing where everything just added together and you couldn't pick any important details out. So it's always important to avoid that. We're going to deal with a lot of audio tracks in the sound edit, in the sound designing exercise later on. We're going to get 6 or 7 new tracks, probably 3 for sound effects, 3 for soundscape, and also 3 for dialogue, because we have 3 speaking parts in this film as well. So we're going to have a total of 9 tracks to deal with later on. So that's a basic introduction to how multiple tracks work. One more important thing to cover is how we control where our edits, our insert and overwrite edits, go when we're using multiple tracks. Because if I take a simple 3-point edit and just overwrite here, what you'll notice is that it's always appearing in V1 and A1. But we can change that. We can change where our edits are placed into our timeline. I'll make myself a new video track, and here we go. So let's say, for argument's sake, what I want to do, and I can squeeze these tracks up or down by clicking on the join between them and dragging them up or down. Let's say what I want to do is make an edit into track V2 and track A3. You see there are these little orange boxes on the left-hand side here. These are our destination for source patch. That's a Premiere Pro term, but these are where our 3-point edits from the source viewer are going to be placed, hence source patch, right? And if we want to change the track that we're going to edit into, that we're going to insert or overwrite into, or even append into, we need to change these little orange boxes here. So I need to click where it says V2, and that will be grayed out into V1. I then need to click on where it says A3, and that will be grayed out into A1. When I perform an insert or an overwrite edit, it will appear in these tracks here that I now have highlighted in orange. So if I do a simple insert edit, notice now how it's turning up on the second video track and the third audio track, and hence not actually overwriting anything. Now, this is important. If I make an insert edit, look at what happens. Yeah, I shove everything else along and make some empty space. So when we're working on higher video tracks and lower audio tracks, we want to use our F10 overwrite edit, not our F9 insert edits. Otherwise, what we're going to do is we're going to accidentally make lots of blank empty space down here, which we want to avoid. Another thing that is worth noting is that sometimes, if I put this back here, this can also cause confusion with the trim editing modes. I want to be careful. If I ripple on a higher or a lower track, I will still make empty space. So if I'm using a higher or a lower track, I want to be rolling. I want to click on the edit point itself. I want to make sure the green bracket is visible on both sides, and there, that is no longer accidentally introducing empty space into my edit like a ripple edit or an insert edit would. So remember, when we're on a higher video track or lower audio track, we want to overwrite and roll as opposed to insert or ripple, because we can end up accidentally creating this dead space here and we can throw the timing of our edit and our audio out if we're not careful. So this has been a good overview of working with multiple tracks. Like I said, we are going to work with plenty of these during the sound mix. So click on through to the next lecture once you're ready. We are not quite that tight. Okay, so welcome back. We've been through quite a bit of demonstration before we went into this kind of work along for the second pass, but in this one we're going to do our full second pass for the first scene, and unsurprisingly, we're going to spend most of our time sorting out the montage up here, but we'll get to that in due course. First, let's just take a look at what we've got. So I like that as an in point.
Maintain
right.
the tempo. Let's make that flabbiness fabulous.
Okay, cool. Let's take a look at this and let's
make.
So let's start ironing this out, because there's a little bit of a pause here which I'm not too keen on, so let's just trim that in. Remember, T for trim, and then you can click and drag, or you can do it with the keyboard shortcut if you want.
Let's make that. Maintain the tempo. Let's make that flabbiness fabulous.
Now I much prefer the timing of that edit, but there was like a odd little pause before.
Let's make that flabbiness fabulous.
But I can just trim that in.
Tempo. Maintain the tempo. Let's make that flabbiness fabulous.
Okay, let's see what we got here. See if I can trim that in a little bit, see if that helps.
Wayne, maintain the tempo. Let's make that flabbiness fabulous.
Okay, maybe not quite that tight.
Tempo. Let's make that flabbiness.
Maybe just when her expression goes back.
Let's make that.
And there's a lot of this kind of back and forth when you're doing this.
Tempo. Let's make that.
Okay, that's a little bit too much.
Maintain the tempo. Let's make that flabbiness fabulous.
Okay, cool. So I like the timing of that edit there. Let's move on to the next one. There's a little bit too much. Because what I was trying to do was match him kind of turning to look, but because we don't really see it here, I think I can trim this down. So just a little bit of time there, and then there we go. So he appears to be moving in there. So what I want to be careful of is that this shot can drag on for a bit. It's quite long and quiet, so
Fabulous.
There we go. And then whip pan, and we're into this bit. So now this is where we get the retiming curves and everything sorted. So it's also worth noting, as we use different tools and everything, all of our markers also get moved along as well. So we don't need to worry about moving things out from underneath our markers.
Fabulous.
And then whip pan. So we now need to open up the retiming controls, and remember we do that right click, retime controls, and what we want is for this whip pan to get much faster. So I need to move to the point where the whip pan begins, and it's about there, and then I want to hit this little down arrow icon here, and I want to go to add a speed point, because what I want to do is I want to make this whip pan faster. So I'm going to go to change speed 150 and see what happens. And as long as I am in trim mode, all of this automatically trims down. So, that's looking good to me. So now we need to go ahead and we need to do all of the retiming. Now I'm going to do the retiming of this bit first. And I think what I've kind of decided on here is that I want most of this, most but not all of it, to be in little half-second bites, and then the longer action can be justifiably longer. But this kind of little bursty bit in here, I want to make these all have like a uniform duration. I do want these to all be about 13 frames, half a second long, and we'll see how that goes. Yeah? Because sometimes in little kind of fast-paced bits like this, it can be very helpful to make what we call metric montage, which is when every cut is of the same length. Those of you who have seen Battleship Potemkin will know what I'm on about there. So, and if you haven't seen Battleship Potemkin, go and watch it. That's your homework. Kidding. So, let's take a look at this. I want to go retime controls. Now, I want the whip pan to be very fast, but I don't want the lifting of the catch here to be quite as fast, so I'm going to make another speed point. So that's when we kind of come in there. I'm going to go add speed point. Now, there's another way of doing this which makes things a little bit easier. As long as I have the trim editing mode active, I can click on this upper right or upper left corner here, and I can bring it in, and that will automatically increase the speed and ripple the rest of my edit as well. So I can do this by eye and then check. Now I think both of those need to be a little bit faster, so okay, that's getting better, yeah? So that's a nice blurred out whip pan, and that really does help disguise the cut between these two quite different shots. Like I said, colorist's problem later on, and I was the colorist on this project for real, so I know how that feels. Now there's a little bit of drift on the marker here, so I'm just going to try and keep that in place. Cool, and I like that, but still the drawing back of the little latch there is too slow, so I can just click and drag up here. Oops, what am I doing? There we go. I'll just click and drag up here. I'll say about 150 and see where that goes. So, way. And maybe just a little bit faster, maybe 180, we'll see. Okay, cool. So this is beginning to take shape. So, what I want to do is I want to try and make these cuts about half a second long each. Oh, what am I doing? So there's a little trick that I'm going to teach you that's really useful when you're doing this kind of metric editing. If I hit the plus key, and I need to make sure that I don't have any clips selected when I do this, otherwise it will ripple, roll or slip the clip I have selected. If I hit the plus key, which on a standard keyboard is just one to the left of the backspace on the upper right, then I enter into a mode where I can type in a number, and I can type in either the number of frames I want to move or the number of seconds I want to move. And if I type plus and then 13, what you'll notice is in the upper right of the program viewer up here, next to this little colourful circle icon, we have equals 13. When I hit enter, I'm going to jump forwards by exactly 13 frames, which is close enough to half a second in 25 frames per second. Yeah? So I'm going to hit enter now, and my playhead has jumped forwards by 13 frames. Now I know how long exactly half a second is here. I can right click on this clip, I can go to retime controls, and I can just ripple it down to half a second. Yeah? Because I wanted all of that action to be squeezed into that space. If we're doing stylized, goofy little montages like this, then that's actually quite a nice way of working. And I'm going to go forwards, I'm going to go hit plus, type in 13, hit enter, and then we're just going to see how all of this goes, yeah? And then once again, need to make sure I have nothing selected. Plus 13, enter. So Control and R, and then ripple it down. So let's see how this is going. It may be that this is too quick, and I maybe want to make things last about 18 or 20 frames each, just under a second. But we'll take a look. Okay, I'm not reading the action there, so what I might do is I might slip that down. Cool. Okay, what I'm getting from this is that 13 frames is a little bit on the fast side, so I can go back, I can do the same trick. Let's give them an extra 5 frames. I'm going to show you a trick to get all of these rippled at the exact same time and save a bit of time. I'm going to click and drag, and I want to select these 3 edit points, yeah? Now, as long as I have these multiple edit points selected and I'm in trim mode, my nudge keys will actually move all 3 edit points down, yeah? What I now want to do is I want to hit U and make sure that the left side of all 3 edit points has been selected. And then I'm just going to hit the nudge right key 5 times. And what that will do is it will ripple all 3 clips along at the exact same time. So now I can go back and I can check with 18 frames of duration instead of 13. So when I'm working on lots of clips like this and I want to make a metric montage, and again, metric montage is when every clip in the montage is the same length, this can be a really nice little shortcut for doing that. So let's take a look. Okay, cool. That's looking better to me. I'm still going to slip this along a bit. There we go, because now I can actually see that he's tied the shoelaces. Maybe I don't want the hands leaving frame. Maybe just about there is enough. Cool. So, let's take another look. Cool, so I quite like the way this is taking shape. What we need to do now is keep going until we reach pretty much this point, and this is when we can start to break our little metric thing that we've got going. So, I've decided on 18 frames, plus type in 18, hit enter again. What in the world? Plus 18, enter, there we go. And then I'm just going to nudge this edit forwards until I have what I want. So, and then again. Oops. Making sure I have nothing selected. And then nudge that in. So this one I need to speed up a little bit. So I'm just going to enable retime, that's Control and R, and then trim it back here. No, that looks a bit wrong. Maybe we can justify this being a bit longer then. Cool, okay, that's coming along quite nicely. So I want to add this can slow down a little bit here. So let's say here, and I can just click on the X here to get rid of my retime if I don't want that. Let's say around here is where things can slow down a little bit. So I'm also just going to give this a little bit of breathing room. Just a little bit more breathing room as well. There we go. So I'm just going to trim this one out a little bit, just extend that so we give Wayne a little bit of time to stand back up. I like the idea of there we go. So that's probably a little bit down. There we go. Cool. So let's go back and take a look at this. Let's see what we think. Okay, maybe that speed up on the shoe tying, that's standing out to me. So I'm going to speed that up a little bit, but then I think I'm just going to trim that in as well. So plus 18. And if I trim down here, it's not going to affect the speed of the clip. Yeah? So then what I will do is I will nudge that in just a little bit. And I'll slip that back. There we go. Because that was going too fast before. That looked a bit weird. So let's see what we've got. Cool, that's taking shape. So I'm quite happy with most of that now. Last thing we want to do to finish this off is we want to put the little zoom ins on. So what we want to do is bring up the inspector. So I'm going to left click on this clip. I'm going to go back to standard select edit mode now just so I don't make any mistakes. I'm going to left click on this clip to select it. Open up the inspector, and again that's the spanner and the paintbrush up here, and I just want to add a little kind of zoom ins every time I get a new cut, just to add a little bit of energy to it all. And we keep doing this until pretty much this shot, which is when we stop with the whole kind of goofy zoom in thing, because this is where things really slow down. We begin to slow down a little bit here, but this is where things really slow down in this montage. Yeah. So we'll just stop putting the zoom in on there. So the first zoom I want is pretty much once we get the water bottle in and the action starts. So and it's there. So I'm going to hit the diamond next to zoom. I'm going to go forwards maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 frames. Hit the diamond again. Place another keyframe, or you could just drag to the right. I do a lot of work in After Effects, and I manually place keyframes a lot as a matter of habit. If I get rid of this one, you can just make a change afterwards, and it will automatically do that. And I'm going to zoom in by about 10% to 1.1, and let's see how that goes. Now, when stacking up keyframing and the retime controls, we can't see both our standard kind of keyframes and the retime controls at the same time. So I just need to hit Control and R to toggle off the retime controls. Then I need to hit the diamond down here, yeah, lower right of the edit thumbnail, and that will expose my keyframes. So that appears to have fallen off. I must have hit Control Z one too many times. Let's go in about 15, 16%, maybe 18%, see what we think. And I think maybe that can start about here. So I want to move my keyframes around, and that's quite easy to do. I can click and drag a box to select them, and if they're orange they are selected. Then I can simply left click and drag them back. If I want them hang on. If I want them to move back, and I can then retime my animation. So the watermarking makes this look a little bit odd, but without that it would be fine. So now I want to add the same kind of animation, and I think I went for about 6 or 8 frames. So I want to add the same kind of animation to these clips as well. So I'm going to go there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, then in by about 15%. And this is looking a little bit slow, so I'm just going to left click this one and bring it in. So that just gives us a little bit of a punch when it first starts, and maybe at the same time I want to move the position down as well. So I'm going to go back to the first keyframe. I'm going to hit the diamond by position, and then because we're losing our framing there a little bit, what I will do is I will then go to Y position, which is the vertical position, and I will just make sure that we keep the water bottle in the mouth framed properly. When I'm dragging this down, I don't want to expose a black border at the top, yeah? I'll tell you what, this is getting in the way, so I'll turn the marker overlay off for now. Cool. Cool. So what I did just there, we have a little chevron down here. If we hit that, then it will expose all of the different keyframed attributes on a clip. If you need more space in which to view this list, you grab this center divider and you can drag it up or down to give either your audio or your video tracks more space whilst you're working. So I just drag that down a little bit, and there I've got enough space to see everything that I've keyframed separately. I can now drag individual keyframes around as I like. And when I'm done, I just hit this little chevron again. It will collapse all of those back, and I just see a very simplified summary of the animation I've got. So, and I want to go ahead and do the same thing on all of these clips here. So what I can also do, and in this one I probably don't want to zoom to pan up, so in this one I can probably just zoom. So I'm going to go ahead and just add that little kind of punch in to each of these clips as we do this. Now we've got text here, so I need to be careful about making sure that we don't have what we call unreadable text, or that I don't compromise the readability of the text when I'm doing this. So let's just see how this one goes first, because what I want is for them to see that we have 70, and I feel that if we do that, if it's moving, it's harder to read. So I'm actually not going to use the zoom on this clip. I might just punch it in a little bit and bring it over slightly. So that way the 70, you know, the numbers are a little bit more central and therefore easier to read. But I'm not going to give this one the kind of punch in that I gave it before. Okay, cool. So let's take a look at this. And the sound design will really help sell this as well. But this is taking pretty good shape. So let's go back and take a good look at what we've made. Okay, I'll tell you what I might do is we don't really see the 30 there. So I think I need to trim that out, and that way we just get a bit more of a chance to see that he's taking it from 70 down to 30. There we go. Put that down. Get up. And go to the next scene. Cool. Okay, that's looking pretty good to me. Just one more proof check. We always watch what we've done over and over and over again. Okay, excellent, good. Right, I'm pretty happy with that little montage now. The final touch will be some sound design later on, where we can put kind of, whooshes and some better audio in there as well. And there's a lot of sound work to be done. I mean, this shot exterior, it shot exterior in a park, so there's going to be plenty of sound work to do here later on. But what we'll do is go through and we'll do a sound pass later on. You will find out that a lot of what we do in sound is disguising more than it is anything else, as opposed to actually removing things. So let me just turn off these displays so I don't have an empty track. Cool, so that is our second pass of the first scene. It's pretty much there now. I wouldn't really change anything more about it in terms of picture. Maybe a little bit more of a refinement here if I feel like it later on. But I'm not going to spend inordinate amounts of time just, making a video where I spend like a good hour and a half on this bit just now. I'm pretty happy with this. So what we will do next is we will move on to the second scene, and then we've got a fair amount of dialogue editing and dialogue trimming and refinement to do, which is going to be a lot of fun. So click on through to the next lecture once you're ready.